Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. So we learned prior to the game on Sunday that the Falcons have a third-round pick for Montez Sweat, who is a free agent after this year. But as we've talked about a lot over this trade deadline, if they're going to make a move for a Sweat or a Chase Young or a Danielle Hunter, which is, I no longer think, I don't know. The Vikings are in a weird position. When they beat the Packers, it was like they're not trading anybody. But then they lose Kirk Cousins, and it's like, do they punt the season? So they're now back in that weird position where they got to make a decision on what it is. I still don't think Hunter's really probably in the picture. I think they should keep him. It doesn't matter. If they go after any of these guys, they're going to need to extend them, and that would obviously be the plan here with someone like Sweat. But does the injury to Grady Jarrett, how does that affect things? Does that affect anything? Does that make them more likely to do a trade in some capacity? Do they still go after a guy like Sweat? How does that impact Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith and whoever's making these decisions going into the trade deadline on Tuesday?
Falcons fans are panicking, and they would, make up the offer and be like, we got to get this done. We lost Grady. We need to kind of replace that production. We need it. That is not how Terry Fontenot operates. In fact, that's not how good GMs operate. They don't, make a deal out of necessity. They make a deal because the value is right, regardless of, if it fills a position of need or not. And you mentioned it. There will be no scenario where the Falcons acquire a blockbuster-esque kind of player without an extension in place. In fact, Ben Standing, he's the athletic beat writer for Washington, came out and said, that one team has officially offered a 2024 third-round pick, which, Chase mentioned, which we already know. But he did add this one piece that I think is incredibly important, that it would turn into a second-round pick if Montez Sweat agrees to a contract extension. Now, he didn't name the Falcons as that team, but you have to, we could put the pieces together that, the Falcons are confirmed to offer that third-round pick, and, it only makes sense if the Falcons, extend this guy. So I think that is a second round pick for a player of Montez Sweat's caliber is pennies. It's chump change. And this front office has shown no ability to use its second round picks on a guy that could even come close to Montez Sweat. So I'm absolutely all for a deal like this. And it has more to do with the future, in my opinion, than it does this season. Though it's a convenient, Grady Jarrett gets hurt, Montez Sweat comes in. They don't play the same position, but it does, Calais Campbell can kick inside Montez Sweat. So there's plenty, that makes sense in the present, but I think building to the future, Calais Campbell, 38 years old, probably not going to come back. This Bud Dupree's on a one-year deal, Lorenzo Carter, one-year deal. This adds and it stabilizes the future of the defensive line. Love everything about this.
Yeah, I mean that's the deal. Like it only really, I mean, everything the Falcons are doing right now has to just be looking towards the future. Anyone that really cares too much about this season is just like, that's why so many Falcons fans are sitting here. Well, maybe not all of them, but that's why they're banging their heads against the wall, because they're so focused on winning this year. When the reality is, we talked about all the ceiling here is maybe 10 wins, whether it's Heineke, whether it's Ritter, whatever starting, whether you make a big trade or whether you don't make a big trade. The ceiling's not going to change this much. It's all about getting better for the future. But I do love, listen, especially when you talk about how poorly this team is drafted and how well they've evaluated talent at the NFL level. So you got to think that it's the same thing as kind of like free agency. Like they recognize how Sweat could fit in this thing, and they've done a fantastic job at recognizing NFL talent and how it will plug and play in the defense. They've been much better at that than acquiring it through the draft. And so while I would much rather get a star pass rusher in the second round of the draft, every time they've tried to draft a pass rusher, they look like crap. I mean, the book's still out on Ebiketie and stuff, but still, these guys haven't had the impact anywhere close to what Montez Sweat can bring right now and next year and the year after. So that to me is a really good deal. Whether it comes to fruition, I'm also a little bit interested if that doesn't come to fruition. I do think now with the Grady Jarrett thing, there will be some sort of move. The thing is, if it's not Montez Sweat, who clearly they have interest in, it's not going to be anybody that can even come close to matching what Grady Jarrett can bring. It'll be a very small addition to add to the depth of the defensive line. And I think that's almost like a must now if they don't get a guy like Sweat. So maybe is there an increased likelihood of a trade, one trade? Yes. But the adding of the blockbuster piece, I think remains the same regardless of what happens.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I did want to bring up another side of this argument that, it needs to be considered in all of this is Why give up a draft pick when the Commanders are more than likely going to let Montez Sweat and or Chase Young walk in free agency? Why not just wait? You keep your draft pick and you still sign them long term. The fact is you would now have to compete with 31 other teams or 30 other teams, considering the Commanders probably wouldn't want him in that. So now you're going to get into a bidding war, and you don't necessarily. Yes, the Falcons have the money, but you don't want to spend money just because, this other team has an offer on the table. You want a deal that makes sense for you and rewards a guy like Sweat for, he deserves a big payday. This just gets out in front of that. And what it does is it tells Sweat, hey, we want you here and we want you here bad. Take this deal. It's a more than fair deal. We don't even want to bring this to free agency.
Yeah, I agree. These next, 36 hours, or I guess it's close to 20, 30 hours are going to be very interesting for the Falcons. Coming up after the break, Georgia crushes Florida. We are going to discuss it.